Basically, that's high snow levels with cool temperatures, but not cold. Usually in the Flagstaff area, they're at 7,000 feet or just barely 7,000 feet downtown. So that would make a rain-snow mix with a temperature of around 36, 37 degrees. Not really optimal for significant snowfall unless we get an atmospheric river to develop out of this event. And that's not really showing signs of an atmospheric river other than the fact that there is a good moisture pool sitting south of Hawaii that we might be able to tap into on the subtropical jet, which might bring some type of precipitation event or events to the desert southwest, including Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, and then going up into the plains with also, again, another pool of wet conditions developing in the Gulf of Mexico and temporarily working its way into the Carolinas and just barely eclipsing the New England area with a drier signal over the Ohio Valley at this time and a slight dry signal here in Northern California into the Pacific Northwest. So again, we're not exactly sure. Like again, that conflicts with the other model I showed you that said that there's going to be wetter conditions in the Pacific Northwest. So like I said, they have room for error. Okay, so you got to be careful. But let's look at the PNA. Let's look at the PDO, the AO. All these different things to help us figure out what is setting the pattern as we head into January. A lot of people are probably going to be curious to know that I do believe right now that January will be wetter than December was for California. I don't think January is going to turn out to be quite as dry as December. I hope it doesn't anyway, but it's going to start off dry, okay? The first half of the month is going to be drier than normal. That does not mean the entire month will be drier than normal. Okay, so we can't stress that enough that these things will change. Okay, this might be totally different by tomorrow, but it's encouraging to see that the precipitation is starting to pick up in the southeast and into the Midwest. That's good news for these areas that have been affected by this La Nina so far. And hopefully we can get some relief here in California. Definitely, what a year, a difference a year makes in terms of precipitation and everything else. Let's look at the AO. This is going to give us an idea of what we think AO is going to do. The Arctic Atlantic Oscillation. You can see here it seems to be that we're going to see a slight fall here as we head into January, which would explain the cold weather, and then an increase. Most likely, most models show it going up, not down. About 50% of the models, 40 to 50% of the models say there's going to be a dip, another dip, a stronger dip, and then 50 to 60% of the models say it's going to go up into the positive category. If it goes into the positive category, we could be looking at a different type of blocking event. Basically, that would bring a high pressure center over South Florida into the southeast and cause relatively drier than average conditions if we were to look at just that one thing. But looking at the NAO, we can currently see that the NAO is likely to become positive. Now, the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, if that becomes positive, we tend to get a warmth in the west with relatively dry conditions. But again, we can't just look at NAO alone. It's the PNA that really is going to telltale what is going to happen. And again, like I said, the PNA is positive right now, and most likely it's going to stay positive for quite some time, especially as we head into January here. The first week of January looks relatively positive, which means that it's going to be warmer and drier than normal here in the West until this dip occurs. Last week, this was going to go down right away. Yesterday, it said it was going to go into the negative category the first week of January, but now it's saying that it's going to be positive. Now, this has changed quite a bit, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. You can't necessarily say that that's going to be 100% accurate. But again, we look at these models for these reasons alone. It's important to take these into account, everything. The AAO, the Arctic Oscillation, Antarctic Oscillation, is kind of all over the place. It's kind of waving back and forth. We got ups and downs and different things, so it's kind of staying in the neutral category, but more shifting towards the positive side. And that would tend to bring ridging in the Arctic region, the Arctic Circle area, Antarctic area, to bring ridging in those areas with, slightly warmer than average conditions and relatively on the dry side for those areas, which would kind of explain why we have a huge high pressure system almost near the Arctic Circle right now. It's absolutely incredible. the type of pattern that we've been going into. But again, you take it with a grain of salt. This is not an actual 100% guarantee forecast, okay? So don't go getting scared and everything that this is the final forecast. This is what's going to happen. It's subject to change. That's why I give you guys updates on these things, because we don't necessarily know what exactly is going to happen. It's a 50-50 chance with any weather forecast you make, especially long range. You got to be really careful with that. But I do them just to give you guys an idea of what could be happening as we head into the first part of January. And that would take us almost to 2 weeks out, and to be specific, from the 26th through the 12th time period in terms of that. Okay, so now we'll go to Google real quick. We'll do a quick search for the CFS model, just to get an idea of what we think might happen in terms of precipitation. We're going to look at the assemble members, and the assemble members will give us an idea of what we think might occur in terms of precipitation and temperatures. But again, it's not the actual forecast, okay? It's just to give you a brief idea of what we think might or might not happen across much of the country. Let me see, there we go. Okay, so you got two of them you can go to. I like to use the tropical tidbits, only because it seems to be more accurate in terms of where we think this precipitation is going to set up, or where we think, you have the models on there as well, the GFS model, the ECMWF model. There's different models that you can look at to help you get an idea of what we think could or could not occur across the country. So again, we'll take a look at what we got going on. So basically here, we're going to go to the assemble members. And the assemble members, I'm going to be honest, have been all over the place lately. They've been all over. It's been very difficult to try to get a handle on any one thing. It's just not been easy. The assemble members have been constantly changing their tune here for quite some time. So basically what we're looking at here is through January 1st. And you can see, again, a northwest flow off the Great Lakes. Okay, and when you have these northwest flows, that means Lake Ontario, Lake Erie especially, and around Buffalo, New York, you're going to get a lot of lake effect snow with very cold air blowing over relatively warmer lakes. You're talking a recipe for major lake effect snow events. And this pattern may not change any too quickly across the area any too soon, other than the fact that I'll get, to see what we think is going to happen. So we'll start with the first and see what happens with the ridging. So this is for today's date, the GEFS mean, and we'll go next slide. You can see as we start heading through the 4th and the 5th, you can see the ridge starts going up into the Pacific Northwest. And that's going to start to open the door to the subtropical jet, which would be, down in this relative region here. We've got the Pacific jet stream here, the North Polar jet, so to speak. But again, if the ridge builds up here, this is going to cause a dividing line with temperature and precipitation, which would mean very cold conditions here in the east and warm conditions here in the Pacific Northwest, with some room for some little wiggle down here in Arizona and the desert Southwest. But let's go a little deeper in time and see what they think is going to happen. You can see the high pressure continues to go up north into Alaska and up into the Arctic Circle, into the North Pacific, and we start getting into a more zonal pattern. But we're also starting to see that there's some cold showing up here. This goes out through the 11th. You can see some cold starting to develop here in this relative area, which will be Utah, Northwest Arizona, and parts of California. So is that going to bring rain since it's a bit more zonal? Well, yes and no. Again, we still have that pesky ridge that's still barely visible on the screen here, up into the Gulf of Alaska. It depends on where this ridge is going to set up. I mean, it's going to be really dependent upon that. But like I said, by this time, by the 11th of January, remember I said we'd see some moderation in temperatures as well as pattern, that it'll become a little bit less amplified. And that's exactly what it's showing here. It looks like the pattern is going to become slightly less evident in terms of drastic cold, like we're in right now, and drastic warmth in the west. So now we're going to check out precipitation. We're going to the precipitation index to give us an idea. So you go back into the assemble members, and we're going to go to the GEFS, and we're going to look at precip to give us an idea of what we think is going to occur in terms of getting precipitation in this area. It's going to be quite interesting to see what they think is going to happen in terms of precipitation across much of the area. So we'll go to precipitation and moisture, and we're going to want to go to 7-day, total accumulated precip, just to give you an idea of what they think. Again, looks like this has started all over again here for precipitation. Since it's 5 p.m., the new model's out. So let's see where this goes here. That goes out to the 1st. Okay, that's the 1st. Let's go all the way to the end of the slide and see what they say. All right, this was wetter earlier. This is not as wet as it was earlier. The new model that just came out says it's